How much control do you think that you have, especially in the brand department, over brand narratives?
It's a huge reason why I got into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I call it the bureaucratic red tape. There's so many ideas that ended up on the cutting room floor that I thought would have been culture shaping, transformative, the type of thing that you would share to all of your friends that for silly reasons, legalities, or we can't do it because it's always been done this way, or the partner doesn't love it.
Harry, how are you? Welcome to Excuse Me, Sir.
Thank you so much. Excuse me, sir. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my God, stop. That was the best intro I've ever had. Thank you for using it back. You've obviously worked inside some of the largest brands and shaped some of the most iconic narratives that we know. Worked with Paris Hilton, Airbnb. What did working with Paris teach you about building brands that most founders fundamentally forget?
She had a really iconic line, which was, "I'm not a dumb blonde, I'm just really good at pretending to be one." It was a masterclass in developing my personal brand. I learned so much just based on this person who had done everything where she's at the nucleus and then she was able to create all these different spokes around it, and that was fascinating. So at the time I was head of brand at Tinder. I was leading global marketing. I was really focused on acquiring Gen Z women to the app. That was something that had stood out to what Paris was looking to do, which was create a media company that could kind of future-proof her personal brand. At the time we were working out of her kitchen counter. It was dogs everywhere. It was the first year she had her baby.
You're from the US and chose to build in Australia. Why?
It's juicy. I was coming out of hustle culture. I was totally like the rat in the wheel where every single day felt monotonous. I needed that jolt of, oh my gosh, is this gonna be the rest of my life? This can't be the rest of my life.
Get ready to say excuse me, sir, because in this episode, we are challenging the very narratives, rules, and systems we're taught about building generational wealth as women.
Are you ready to say excuse me, sir, and question all of the rules that we know about building success?
I've never been more ready.
Beautiful.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. I fell into a bit of a Perry rabbit hole. I don't know if I told you this, but I was looking through different podcasts to listen to, and then I found yours, and then I found your profile, and then you messaged me and was like, love the podcast. And I was like, I need to get you on the podcast. So this was like an impromptu let's go. And I'm so excited because you'll get to know Perry over the course of this episode. But I already feel like we're so similar. Like we give such a similar energy.
100%. I was going to say it's classic like girl crushes in the
Yeah.
making where it's like, wait, I love what you do. I love what you do. But this is the best. I feel like there's a shift right now with women and female founders where there used to be, this apprehension to, lift the ladder up beneath you. And there was almost this notion that if there was room for one woman, there wasn't room for another. And I have genuinely felt like a palpable shift in recent years where there is such a hype girl energy and everyone is like, I love what you do. I love what you do. Come on my pod, come on my pod. And it's so refreshing and it's so good. And I completely agree.
Okay, today let's dive in because we don't have that much time and I have a lot of questions that I'm trying to stick to right now. There are lots of different avenues that I want to go into with you. There's obviously your past as, you've built some of the biggest brands in the world, and then now transitioning into your own ownership and building that brand, building such a phenomenal community. The Pilates community you have is 36,000 followers at this point. All of your events have like 100+ people wait list. So there is a lot to dive into. Also the fact that you're from the US and chose to build in Australia. Why?
It's juicy. Where do we want to start?
Start there. Why Australia? Everyone moves from Australia to the States.
Totally. And I get this question all the time, by the way. And I think Australia came about in a time of my life where I was coming out of hustle culture. I was totally like the rat in the wheel where every single day felt monotonous. I was getting up and doing really hard cardio in the morning and then going to my girl boss job. And I really just wasn't taking care of myself. And I think I ultimately moved over to Australia because I wanted a lifestyle shift. And by doing so, I really fell in love with wellness and really realized that true success, which I probably would have previously measured as career success, true success is the ability to balance your mental and your physical well-being in addition to that ambition. And until you've achieved that balance, you can't really call yourself successful.
You've obviously worked inside some of the largest brands and shaped some of the most iconic narratives that we know. Obviously, you worked with Paris Hilton, Airbnb, and so I really want to start there. I want to think about this theme of those who own the narrative, own the rules. People who shape narratives are the ones that get to decide what the fuck happens in business, in life, in media. And so I want you to think back to those businesses, and I want you to think of who actually was the lead in shaping narratives in that room. And it's an important conversation because obviously you were head of brand at these companies, right? What did that look like? What did that entail? Who did you speak to at these companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you're head of brand, you are really tasked with, again, we go back to that why that we talked about, tasked with creating, a why for some of these oftentimes faceless brands, obviously Paris being the exception. But when you're working for, Fortune 500 companies, they're these faceless brands, and what you're trying to bring to consumers is some sort of brand messaging around the why and the ethos behind these brands. And, now that I've moved into the wellness category, it's especially crucial to say, a lot of athleisure, for example, looks the same, but you buy based on, this aligns with my lifestyle as a runner, or this aligns with my lifestyle as a Pilates girly. So I think when you're in a brand role, it's really about creating that identity that consumers can resonate with and buy into as, again, resonating with that why.
When you're working in corporate, and this is coming from someone that's spoken to a lot of corporate badasses in the past, how much control do you think that you have, especially in the brand department, over brand narrative?
I love that question because it's a huge reason why I got into entrepreneurship to begin with. Yeah, I call it the bureaucratic red tape because there's so many ideas that ended up on the cutting room floor that I thought would have been culture shaping, transformative, the type of thing that you would share to all of your friends that for silly reasons, legalities, or we can't do it because it's always been done this way, or the partner doesn't love it, or those are all things that I think get alleviated when you start your own business, and especially when you partner with businesses that are scrappy as well. And to kind of what you alluded to earlier, the further up you get into the food chain and the more senior you get, and I can attest based on talking to a number of senior executives, the further away you get from that passion point of what you fell in love with in the first place. A perfect example, most CMOs would describe their job as politics and, admin. But they got into that role because they wanted to make cutting edge Super Bowl commercials, right? So this is something that everyone feels. And I think if you're going through that, my advice to you would be, even if you don't quit your day job, right? Stay in the corporate 9 to 5, pay your bills, that's so essential. But find something that fills your cup on the side, whether it's a side hustle, whether it's a hobby, because I think it's really crucial, because ultimately the more senior you get, the further removed you're going to get from maybe that initial reason and that passion that you got into it to begin with.
We have to remember who's listening to this, right? A lot of the conversations that we have around ownership, leverage, relational capital, continuity, we're speaking to a lot of 7 to 9 figure founders that have built phenomenal businesses. And the problem is they're starting to hit that point of like, oh shit, we are hitting that red tape. We are hitting that place of, where am I becoming the bottleneck? And so I'm curious from your standpoint, just because I'm a nosy Nelly, with the companies that you may or may not have worked at in the past, okay? Confidentiality agreements, okay?
We're NDA heavy over here, let me tell you.
With your experience, who do you think had the most influence over the graveyard of ideas? In the sense of, who was the one that pulled the plug on all the brilliant ideas? Was it investors? Was it founders? Who was it?
I would say both. I would say oftentimes there were a number of times where it would be an investor would come in last minute, or you see all the time a super creative fashion house gets acquired by a private equity company, and there's a huge shakeup and things like that. So definitely things like that. I think even things as simple as hiring decisions become really bottlenecked, and what used to be really easy to bring in creative talent or carve a role out from nothing to say we need a creative director to come in, or a chief vibe officer. That's one of my favorite roles on LinkedIn right now. But those are the first things to get cut by people in more of that board position, CEO, investor roles, because I think it's probably to the effect of really not understanding the role of disruption and culture shaping and brand awareness in the larger funnel, because there's really not that directly attributable ROI, which is what many people who are skewed towards, finance and analytics want to see.
And this really hammers in my point around why it is so disheartening that we continue to see women sell to the man, right? I am all for an exit. Like, I love a good exit. I want women to feel empowered in whatever decision that they want. The problem is we're sold the narrative that exit is success, right? And so then we exit to whoever's got, the best partners, the best operational firepower, the best payout, whatever it might look like. And so you see these brilliant, even skincare companies and beauty companies, you see them sell to L'Oreal and LVMH and KKR. And then what the fuck happens to them? Like, they just truly crumble in on themselves because they forget what the point is in the first place. They forget the innovative scrappiness of what it is to build a startup, what it is to build community, and it's all worried about top line. And this is why it keeps on coming back to, we need more women leaving these spaces, creating ownership through entrepreneurship in some way, shape, or form, building companies to this size, and then getting acquired by other women who get it. So I love this conversation. And I mean, you obviously have such a phenomenal background that I would love to come back for another episode to dive into. But one of the key areas that I think is most iconic is obviously Paris Hilton. What was your relationship there? What did you do? Run me through that past and background.
Yeah, so at the time I was head of brand at Tinder. I was leading global marketing.
I didn't know that you're at Tinder.
Yes, Tinder.
What the hell? You're like a firecracker that keeps on firing. It's insane. I feel like every time I'm in your world, online right now, but now in person, I learned something new. That's crazy.
So we learned that, so I swiped right on Tinder at the time. But at the time, I was really focused on acquiring Gen Z women to the app. And that was a tall task because, I think just socially, we know that when you're young and gorgeous, you don't usually need the dating apps. So that was something that had stood out to what Paris was looking to do, which was create a media company that could kind of future-proof her personal brand. Yeah. And by future-proof, I mean essentially take all of her amazing brand equity over her 20-year career and make it so that she doesn't need to be, physically present for there to have brand value, or to particularly appeal to a younger generation to, again, future-proof her for future years. So that kind of unique experience and how I was uniquely targeting Gen Z women is what ultimately stood out to them. I signed on as vice president of marketing and head of brand for her media company, 1111 Media. At the time, we were working out of her kitchen counter. It was dogs everywhere. It was the first year she had her baby. It was, again, coming from big corporate, it was a total, oh my gosh, my brain exploded, I think, week one. However, I think it was a masterclass in developing my personal brand. I learned so much just based on this person who had done everything where she's at the nucleus and then she was able to create all these different spokes around it. And that was fascinating. And two, I think it was my first touch point with real entrepreneurship, because this was a perfect example of if we had ideas, we could pursue them. And we were kind of building the plane as it flew. What did working with Paris teach you about building brands that most founders fundamentally forget? Because obviously, again, you came from big corporate and then coming into building an innovative, scrappy brand in a kitchen with one of the most iconic women that literally shaped influencer culture as we know it today. What did that teach you about going out on your own and doing it yourself? She had a really iconic line, which was, I'm not a dumb blonde, I'm just really good at pretending to be one. And what that meant to me was, don't be afraid to create a public persona or public brand that differs from maybe what you bring home with you. And I think with TikTok and some of these, UGC style content series that are so raw and so behind the brand, I think people get tripped up because they're like, oh, I feel like I need to show everything. I need to show every look under the hood. Don't be afraid to say, the part that I want to share behind my business is exclusively, for me, wellness focused, or the part that I want to share is exclusively about being a working mom. I think it's okay to create a brand and own a niche versus trying to show every bit all at once. And that was something that she was so good at, is she was an absolute weapon and so intelligent, but she zeroed in on a brand that said, I'm, pink and sparkles and all these things, and was able to create, like I said, a 20+ year career around that. Which is insane. Like, I watch interviews now where you can see her context switching. When she's speaking to a person in Paris, as we know her voice,
It's that like, oh, I'm glittery. And then you see her switch back into, oh, I'm having a serious conversation again. And her tone quite literally drops. It's insane to watch. And it's not just her. I think that's ripple affected across a lot of celebrity brands that we see today. We're starting to see this duality in the fact that they're not just reality stars, or they're not just movie stars, they're actual business owners. I'm curious to know if there is any element of that you brought into your own building. I know that you've really niched down and focused on health and wellness, and it's okay if you didn't, but did you bring any of that, I'm not a dumb blonde, but I'm good at pretending to be, energy into this new brand?
I think the biggest thing when I sought out to start my business was explaining my why. And I think that was something that I definitely learned from the personal branding with Paris, is she's had so much trauma and things that have led her to, even that baby doll voice as to why she is the way she is, that she's now opened up about. And I actually think there would have been opportunity to do that sooner. So for me, I've led a lot with my personal journey as to personal and professional pivots that led along the way that actually led me to that, what I call, bit of crash out and burnout that kind of led me into the wellness space. And I think I've been met with a lot larger audience and a lot more resonance by sharing a bit more about my personal journey and how that led me into this business. And it's really funny. I come from a really, really private family. And I got a call from my dad the other day, and he was like, I just want to know how much you're planning to disclose on your podcast. And I was like, so fair. We couldn't be more different. But it actually is what's allowing people to connect with my community and the why. So I have a lot of conviction behind doing so.
I feel that fundamentally in my soul, because it was the exact same thing when I started coming out about my story growing up. It's very public. I talk about it everywhere. But my parents and I had this very tumultuous relationship growing up, and I've never shied away from that. I've always been like, you're going to do something, own it, and I'll talk about it. You know what I'm saying? But it's so interesting growing up in households where, I don't even think it's just us exclusive. I think any household where your dirty laundry is being aired in some way, shape, or form is terrifying to have so many people seeing that. But to your point, it's the very thing that makes us remember we're all human.
And that's, I have a favorite phrase, which is honesty is disarming. And it really is. If you meet people with just a little bit of humility and a little bit of vulnerability, I would way rather sit down to a coffee chat with someone who's like, hey, today was not great, than someone who's like, and I'm firing at all cylinders and everything's great. Because even if you think of the number one person you want to be, that person that you put on your whiteboard, for me, it's Bethany Frankel. She has her own set of baggage too, right? But that's the person that I think of as my magnum opus of, oh my gosh, if I make it in business, I'm like her. She went through like a 10-year-long messy divorce and all the things. Like, nobody has all of their bits and pieces together, but I think I'd way rather sit down and have a chat with someone who kind of just leads with some of their insecurities and some of their vulnerabilities, because again, we all have them.
There is one more question I have for you about building brands, and it comes back to this idea of repetition, right? Because the entire theme of what we're talking about is narrative. Those who control the narrative own the system. And so when we think about this word of repetition from a branding standpoint, how important do you think that word is, and repetition is, in helping shape a perception of truth for consumers?
I consult a lot of brands now, and the number one thing that I ask them and tell them, if you cannot answer this cleanly like this, you need to take a long, hard look at your marketing strategy. And it's this phrase, the one who, fill in the blank. If you cannot answer that about your brand, where your target consumer would be getting drinks with a group of girlfriends talking about your brand, and they say, oh, you know it, it's the one who. I'll give you a perfect example. Before we sat down today, you were telling me about a couple different beverage brands. And you're like, you've heard of them. They're the one who. That's a brand that's doing their branding effectively. But if you kind of stutter your way through that answer and you're like, yeah, I think we're kind of at the space, and we intersect these. You need to sit down and you need to work on your brand strategy, because consumers have about this much mental brain space to think about your brand, and you want them to be able to answer that phrase cleanly. So, for Skims, you would say they are the ones who have elevated shapewear, right? Or, pick any brand, pick Nike. They are the ones who are high performance, workout wear. But if you can't answer that phrase for your brand, you need to dig deep. And to your point about repetition, you need to hit people over the head with that messaging all the time in hopes that maybe 1 in every 11 interactions with your brand, they're able to answer that.
I want to tie this back to something that's going to be a little bit controversial, but I want you to think of even the current Trump campaign, right? Trump and people in power use repetition so frequently, you don't even realize it. To the point where you almost feel gaslit in your own truth, because it's like, no, wait, I think I saw that with my own eyes. But they keep on saying over and over and over again, it wasn't what you saw. And then you start to believe this truth. And one thing that I think about, which was why I was writing this question down in that episode, was even this idea of how we're taught truths about health and wellness as women. For example, there was this big upswing in you have to do contrast therapy every single day, and that's the way that you look after yourself. And then there was this big swing of don't do contrast therapy, you're going to ruin your ovaries. And it's crazy around this idea of when you hear a message enough times, it really starts to stick. And that's when we bring real movements. I mean, what's one message now that you see so repeated that you fundamentally disagree with in health and wellness?
In health and wellness, I was going to say the first one that came to mind was the Mel Robbins "Let Them," because I feel like that's been totally beaten over the head. I think there are elements of that are really lovely, but I think for the female demographic, we've all really latched onto that. Is this almost
we already let them?
But exactly. It's like I feel like we've latched onto this as this way to excuse bad behavior, and I really love her and I really love her messaging, but I don't like how it's been distorted and trickled down. But that's a perfect example of too much repetition of something and too much game of telephone, where there's people who haven't even read the book or listened to her podcast that I think are misusing this idea of let them. I think in the health and wellness space, listen, I think longevity and biohacking is on a hot streak right now.
Yeah.
And I think for women especially, we really have to be mindful of extremes. And oftentimes things like cryo and saunas and cold plunging are actually quite detrimental to our hormonal imbalance. And I think with anything, moderation is good. But I think when you're thinking about some of these super hot wellness trends, just be mindful that we are actually impacted more in the long run. And anything in moderation is better, and being gentle on yourself is better than going all in on the latest hack, because oftentimes we don't even know the long-term effects. But as a general rule of thumb, we are more susceptible to some hormonal imbalance, and we're also more susceptible to fibro and PCOS and things like that. So just to be mindful of, don't go on a hot streak of cold plunging just because it's the hot thing right now, because it's probably not going to be the best.
Yeah, and this is why we need more female voices in wellness. Not even just wellness. This is why we need more female voices in every single category, because women are historically proven to be more discerning in where we get our information, how we research, what we're looking into. Also, the fact that we're more discerning around what information actually applies to us versus what applies to men, which is where a mass majority of the information is being sold from. And so it comes back to this idea of ownership, leverage, relational capital, and continuity. When we have these things, and when we have more women at the forefront of media, shaping narratives, building phenomenal brands and sharing their message, that's when the systems start to underwrite themselves. And that's obviously what you did, right? You moved from these are people's dream companies. People are like, I can't even fathom working at a company like that. Then for you to leave and start your own thing. And so I want to dive into this here, because obviously at some point you stopped building other people's brands and you started building the Pilates gang and the wellness community that you have now. I saw you were just signed by an agency.
I was,
Are you so excited?
I'm so excited. It just feels more permanent, I think, especially coming from LA, moving into the Australian market. That was a big piece for me, was really cementing a presence in this market.
Yeah.
And I was doing so scrappy and so ad hoc. And I've been really fortunate to build a network from scratch here. And I think I attribute that to, I'm just an absolute hustler.
Yeah.
But I think that adds a little bit of layer of legitimacy and something that was definitely on my mood board for this year. So I'm very excited to have proper representation.
It's the LA in you.
Yes.
The LA in you is the little hustler, get it done.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to dive into that. And it's so funny because it comes back to this conversation that you were having around you can build this brand and build so many different like epicenters off it. And it's so rare. Like, yes, we see it from the creator standpoint of creators getting signed and then starting businesses. We very rarely see it the other way around of entrepreneurs who then step into this influencer role. I think the biggest one that comes to mind is Crown Affair. What's her name? I don't know what her name is. Do you know her name?
No.
Do you know what I'm talking about? The CEO of Crown Affair. Anyway, she built this phenomenal brand, and then she kind of built her personal brand off the back of it. And then now she's starting to do a lot more like interviews and personal branding things and collaborations. And it's just different ways to monetize. It's different ways to reap the reward of everything that we do and everything that we're good at. We put so much time and energy into building these brands. Let's get our money off of them. You know what I'm saying?
And it's not for the faint of heart. I will say allocating your day to 50% trying to build up a personal brand and relationships and 50% trying to run a business. Like, those are some of my toughest days, is if I have a press or PR obligation and then I'm also have a fire drill to put out. But I do think gone are the days of the faceless founder. And I sing this from the rooftops because it does not come comfortably to women, that I think we're more comfortable in the background. And especially when it comes to like the tall poppy thing and singing, you know, all of our successes, it's totally uncomfortable for women. But to all of the reasons that you said before, nobody is coming to us with handouts. So the more that you feel like you've beaten it with a dead horse of, oh my gosh, I'm so successful, I'm so great, you're probably getting 50% of the airtime of the man next to you.
Yep.
So we kind of do have to be that squeaky wheel all the time to even get a morsel of that airtime and that recognition and that authority in your space.
Yeah, which is so sad, but it's the truth and it's the reality. And like, when you get caught in that truth and that reality and you see that as an obstacle, good luck. You know what I'm saying? You have to look at that truth and reality and think, well, what am I going to do next with the cards that I've been dealt to go even further in and get the recognition that I deserve? So coming back, you were speaking about burnout, and you were speaking about that was like the core part of you wanting to leave everyone's dream job, your dream job, and then come into building something on your own. What did that look like when you were making that decision of, I'm about to give this up and go out on my own? What was your thought process?
I started working the day after I graduated uni. I only ever wanted to be a CMO by 30. On the basically eve of my 30th birthday, I was interviewing for CMO level roles, dream companies. And it was one of those really sobering moments where I took a look around and I wasn't happy and I wasn't fulfilled. I was, again, a hamster on a wheel, but I didn't feel that internal, oh my gosh, when I reach the destination, I'll feel such a way. And I think it was a total reframe of, if you can't be happy in the process and in the making and the behind the scenes, you're never going to be happy when you get that call for that dream job. And that was what really jolted me, was, oh my gosh, I finally got everything that I ever wanted. Like, what gives? Where is this excitement? And I realized I needed a big change. And I actually, through COVID, had fallen into a love of Pilates. I was doing the online Pilates classes, and it was the first time I'd ever done a workout that I felt had mental health benefits as well.
Really?
So I kind of reframed from, you know, I used to be a 6 a.m. berries girl, go into my corporate grind, you know, it was very regimented.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was actually happiest when I was slowing down and happiest when I was taking time for myself. And I think it was just, I needed that jolt of, oh my gosh, is this going to be the rest of my life? This can't be the rest of my life.
What did that feel like then, that defining decision to be like, I'm going to do this?
I think people need to be more real about the lack of support you might get when you decide to go the entrepreneurial route. I think it gets really glamorous when you think about the really successful businesses. But I was actually quite surprised by as simple as things like liking an Instagram of my dearest friends, right? The people who are closest to you won't take the time to, you know, like a post about something you're putting out into the world when you're trying to create. Or, you know, your parents might be trepidatious because they're totally wired for you to be protected and incubated and nothing bad to happen to you. When you're an entrepreneur, bad things happen all the time.
Yes, every day.
And you're kind of just like Captain America with the shield, and you're just kind of going like this. So I think it's understandable, but it's like, you know, you want those to be the people who are your biggest hype people and the biggest ones in your corner. On a positive note, I think that the people who end up being your biggest hype people are people in similar positions. So the more that I've met other, particularly female founders, the more those are the people who are in my comment section, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you, texting me about the announcement the other day about the agency representation. Those are the people who are ultimately going to hype you up. So I think even to what you said earlier about, you know, compartmentalization of being in your masculine at work and being in your feminine at home, you can't really rely on everyone to be all the things to you, especially people in your life who knew you in a certain box that was really comfortable and cozy. So I think the number one piece of advice I would say getting started is try to fill your cup and fill this group of people who are going to be, I call them like your internal board of directors. They're people who you like, you respect, they're doing something similar, because they're just going to be able to be there for you in a way that your dearest friend from childhood might not even know that they're doing it, but you need that support because you are freaking vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea of as you grow and as your role grows, in whatever capacity that is, the ecosystem around you is going to change and it's going to transition and it's never going to look the same. Even like, right, the sounding board and the board of directors that you need around you at that startup phase is wildly different than the people that we need around us when we're building 7, 8, 9-figure companies, when we start investing, diversifying portfolios, when we start acquiring businesses. And it's finding this comfort in change. It's finding comfort in being open to all of the relationships that come. And I made a post about this morning of like, things are going to change every day. You have to look at your plate and figure out what is the best I can do with the cards that I'm dealt and who do I need in this environment to help me go even further.
Can I give an anecdote just this morning?
Yeah.
So I have probably the biggest event we've ever done on Monday evening. It's a rooftop, poolside, huge brand sponsors, like Fortune 500 brand sponsors.
So exciting.
So exciting. But let me tell you, the venue pulled out this morning. We had a contract in place, everything, which, you know, my brain goes to, I'll deal with all of the legal recourse later. I need to replace this venue.
Yeah.
And it was such a pinch me chills moment that I had people to call, one, like that I've been able to establish this network here in Australia, but two, I kid you not, my phone has been ringing off the hook with people being like, here's an option here. Do you like this? Here's a video of this venue, da-da-da. And it's just such a testament of if you invest in these relationships and if you invest in creating this community of fellow creators and builders and visionaries and people who are also putting stuff out there, they will empathize with you so hard because they have also been in this bind 100 times. And everyone, I'm like, how can I repay you? Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And they're like, you can't. I fully empathize that you have just had one of those days where you need the tribe behind you. And I think, you know, for people getting started, it's probably the last thing you want to do is do coffee chats and phone calls and things that don't have some immediate ROI or conversion for your business. But days like today, I am so glad I make time for things like that.
Yeah, it always comes back to this idea of like, yes, we worry about scaling and we worry about scaling almost too quickly at times. We forget how important local communities are. And I felt this so viscerally because I started building my businesses in the US. I completely abandoned Australia. Now having to rebuild Australian soil is like gut-wrenching, like climbing up Mount Everest trying to build all the relationships.
Infancy stage again.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And so this is why when you are building a brand, you have to remember the people that matter, the community, the local community, more importantly, that village, because those are the people that give you the leverage, the continuity that you need to keep on growing. Okay. This is kind of like my last question around this, but we talk about ownership and leverage a lot, like you know. Was there anything that you felt like you gained immediately after leaving and going out on your own? And was there anything that you felt like you lost?
I mean, I feel I am in my absolute truth. I have to say, if you have the entrepreneurial bug, it is the greatest high you will ever experience. And I think I ride a low about 99% of the time, but the 1% good news that happens is enough to keep me on that track. I think it is the most exciting, fulfilling, my cup runneth of how much I enjoy being a business owner and a founder and an entrepreneur. I wish I did it years prior. However, I attribute a lot of my knowledge and experience. I think it was necessary that I had my career in, you know, big corporate because it makes me appreciate and, you know, also feel under-resourced all the time of all these different things. But I think number one thing I experienced was self-fulfillment. And I think if you're someone who's teetering, back yourself and trust that that feeling is going to take over and you'll become this superhuman with the thickest skin that's going to carry you through. I think the number one piece that I'm missing, and I say this a lot of the time, is it's just me right now. And it's really lonely. And there are oftentimes, even with the wins, there's who do you call? Or if you're in a pickle, who do you call? So I think it's something that people should also go in eyes wide open, that when you're on a team and you have a boss and, you know, all the things, you have people to bounce ideas off of, You have people to get a drink with after work and commiserate. When it's just you, no one cares as much as you do, even if it's even if it's your partner, right?
Yeah.
But I think knowing that, hey, this is going to be a pretty lonely journey until you're ready to get external investment, until you're ready to get a business partner, whatever that may mean. So I think for me, that's probably the biggest piece that I'm missing. And that's why I've sought out a lot of community and other female founders to help me fill that gap. But it's still, and every entrepreneur will tell you this, it is a really lonely game.
Yep. All of what you said today is so phenomenal, and there are still so many things here that I want to dive into, but we have exactly 8 minutes until this podcast ends, and I want to do some rapid fire. These are fun, quick, fun. Let's go. Okay. Okay. What's the most anti-wellness habit that you secretly have?
I stay caffeinated, and when I say I stay caffeinated, I mean we rock like a solid 4 coffees a day.
You need to get on those Life Labs
Okay,
yesterday.
I will.
What is it for? The taste or sustenance?
It's the ritual, I think,
Yeah.
and it's the total placebo effect. By the 4 p.m. coffee, it is total placebo, but I know it's my deepest, darkest.
Okay, I'm going to get you some Life Labs because they work a charm. Okay, next one. What influences your spending and investing more than you would like to admit? Or who? Who influences more than you'd like to admit?
I think that I love the athleisure space. I absolutely love, because I feel so lucky that I get to wear a matching set as my work attire.
Yeah.
So I think I'm a pretty soft sell when it comes to like an Instagram ad, and I'll convert very quickly. So I think, this message to all athleisure brands: if you just have a remotely cute image, I'll probably convert in 1 click.
Stop. Have you seen the app Sorted?
No.
You're going to die. It is this app that sorts through all of your online shopping, and like it's the best thing. It's like a gift registry, but you build it for yourself. It has made my online shopping addiction 10 times worse than it already is, because I am consistently saving things to this wish
don't
list.
tell me. The concierge in my building
would be like,
hands
stop.
me my packages at this point, like looking to the side in shame, because they're like, it's another day, here's another haul, and I'm like,
Oh my gosh, stop. Okay, next one. What's one luxury you will never give up?
ooh, one luxury. I get a weekly blowout.
I love that for you.
Yeah.
What a slay. Okay, that's such a good investment. Okay, well, on this, what's one thing you invest in, if you do make investments, that make no logical sense, but you will defend forever? And it can be investments in anything.
This is actually the biggest piece of advice from my mom, who's very into like individual stocks and things like that, is if you absolutely love a brand, be an early investor, and you can actually stomach if it's a total, loss leader and failure. But I think getting into the habit of investing in brands that you actually, as a consumer, love, I think is something that is probably under taught to women.
Yeah.
That I think men are attuned to, but you have to go in with that kind of like mentality of, okay, this might just be a startup that doesn't succeed, but it's made me a more active investor in my own portfolio by way of having an interest in some of the companies that I put my resourcing behind. So for me, it was transformative in terms of actually checking on my portfolio and being an active, investor in all of my different bits and pieces.
It comes back to this idea of like, you wake up in the morning and can look at yourself in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
You're not funding people that are literally destroying the planet, or, championing messages that are putting harm to kids and women and children and all the things, right? And this is why I inherently believe that capital is not neutral. Where we put our capital matters. It's why even the smallest philanthropic decisions make a difference. And I love that you said that, because it's so in alignment with everything that we talk about at SIR. But the last question I have for you today, which now seems kind of silly in relation to the other ones, but you obviously worked around a lot of status in lots of ways. You've been surrounded by phenomenally brilliant people, phenomenally intelligent people, and some of the most iconic women that we have in today's society. What is the most overrated status symbol that you have seen floating around the internet of people trying to emulate that energy, but it's not?
Social following.
Yes. It's so silly and it's so overdone now. Like, we've moved on. You know what I'm saying?
We've moved on. I don't think it represents anything about your authority, your thought leadership. I think, I say this as I'm trying to grow my social following, but I'm trying to grow it thoughtfully and not seek, a short-term spike. I'm trying to grow it thoughtfully as an authority in the wellness and marketing space. So I think if you're someone who's put social media on their, vision board if they want to get better at it, which I hear from people all the time, focus on quality content, focus on owning a niche, focus on creating a personal brand, and ignore those metrics unless you want to go on Love Island, which God
Yeah.
bless.
Stop that now. Well, I mean, like, even building podcasts, right? There are some phenomenal creators that have like 26% engagement rates at phenomenal followings, which we know is pretty much unheard of. They cannot secure sponsorships for their podcasts, for their socials, and nothing because they don't have 1 million followers. It's absolutely insane how much weight we still place on vanity metrics, knowing that they are not even the things that fundamentally convert in the last place. I love that last message. I think it kind of ties into the next one anyway. To wrap it up, if you had one thing that you wanted to say to the 7 to 9 figure founders that are building brands, that are rewriting how we build generational wealth, what would you say to them leaving this podcast?
I would say focus on finding your tribe.
Yeah.
It is a lonely sport, but
Yeah.
it is the most exciting sport. And like I said with my anecdote today, these are going to be the people who are in the foxhole with you, especially when you don't have, that immediate person to call. So invest in those relationships.
Thank you so much for hopping on today's podcast.
Thank you for having
I
me.
adore you.
Can we keep going?
Yeah. I felt so rushed. We need a part 2, okay?
Yes, I love it. I'll come back.
Stop that now. Thanks, guys. I'll see you on next week's episode.
Did we make you question the very beliefs you had about ownership, leverage, capitalism, and power as you know it? This is Excuse Me, Sir.